Hey everybody, and welcome to this special edition of JS Drops. Today we are blessed to have Brandon Roberts with us. You might know Brandon from his contributions to the Angular team, his work on NGRX, or most recently his work on AnalogJS. And that's what we're here to learn more about today. Brandon, thank you for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been working on this for a while now, and like I said, thanks for the warm welcomes on the intro, and looking forward to sharing about analog. So yeah, cool. So I guess we can get right into it. I guess we mentioned before, if you have any questions, I'm kind of going through kind of what analog is and kind of how it works, and we'll walk through some of the pieces and some sample applications. And yeah, feel free to ask questions along the way. So I think I already have I'll share my screen here.
We're already seeing your screen.
Okay, yeah,
if that
there
helps.
You go. Cool. I guess I give the full pitch here for if you're not familiar with what analog is, or for maybe people watching after. Analog is a project that I started, I don't know, it's been a few months ago now, but Analog is a full stack meta framework for Angular. If you're more familiar with Nuxt or Next.js, SvelteKit, those kind of things, this is at least my vision for what that would look like in Angular. I started this, like I said, a few months ago, been working on it. And yeah, we're going to talk about some of the foundational pieces of it, and the things that you can kind of build with it. So the main things there is it has file-based routing. It's built on top of Vite. Hybrid SSR and SSG is some of its features. And of course, if you want to go to the site, you can go to analogjs.org and find out more information there. But yeah, we can get right into it. I've started a kind of demo app here. Yeah, you can, of course, if you want to look at getting started, we have documentation there on how you can do that. I have spun up an example application here just to get started, so we can walk through some of the main features here. And this is just a typical app here that I've run using npm create analog. And I'll get that running here. So this is just a sample application. And if we can move this over just a little bit, get the numbers over. There you go. So a few of the things here, in this is just a simple application. It has a counter. This is one of the different things about analog versus if you look at something like Angular Universal is analog kind of takes some of the things that Angular Universal or even Scully does and does those out of the box. So and if you start an Angular application, you started with a client app, and you have to add Angular Universal to it. Analog is server side rendered out of the box. So if we look at this page would be rendered on the client and the server initially. So even if I have JavaScript turned off, the contents of this page will still be rendered. So if we go back into the project here, and open this up, window, JS Drops. So I have this is what you would get after you scaffold a new analog application. And but this would look very familiar to you if you're building a new Angular application. I'll bring up the term, or as I mentioned here in the docs. If we go to getting started, you can run npm create analog at latest, and this will give you a few prompts to spin up a new application, and it will just scaffold that out immediately for you with some template data. So what we start off with is, like I said, some of these things will look familiar to you in an Angular application. I'm going to delete that. So we have our main.ts, and this is using Angular version 15 with 16. We have a 16 pre-release version out there also, but this is using Angular version 15. We have our main.ts is where you usually bootstrap your application. Your app component, it still uses the Angular router under the hood. Those things are pretty standard there. So, but one of the things that it does have is file-based routing. So if we go back to the main.ts, if you're looking at a typical Angular application you would have here, you would have the Angular router, and you would kind of configure your routes. With Analog, we provide a file router that uses the file-based routing, but it still works. You still provide this to your Angular application in the same way. As far as your bootstrapping, you provide file router, and you define your pages here as routes. So we have our index page here, and this was just a page that I displayed when I first initially started the app up. And like I said, nothing different here about how you build Angular applications, but the file-based routing lets you build these routes in a way that you don't have to necessarily configure the route. You don't have to configure all the routes as you would traditionally. So I can go over some of the few features, just the routes that you can define. Routes are defined using a page.ts extension. So if you can actually co-locate, like if you have other components or other utility functions, TypeScript things you want to include in your pages directory, you can include those there, but only the extensions with .page.ts will be scaffolded out as routes. So I'll create another route here, and we'll call this about .page.ts. And you can use, like I said, this typical Angular syntax. I guess we're not going to let Copilot write everything for me. Disable, there we go. So selector, one thing that I will note here is that you do have to use standalone components with the AnalogJS router, because it uses those. I guess it's still going to autocomplete there. So, but yes, standalone components is, if you're going to use the analog router, you do need to export. There's two things here. You do have to export the default class for your route component, and we call this about page component, and our template here. Okay, and our template here, we have our, still trying to say about analog. So it's still define your template, standalone, imports anything you need there in the same way there. So you can define a route or about, and like I said, if you were doing this manually, you would configure a route and then you'd lazy load the import. So I may need to restart the server, but if everything went well here, no, it's not in about page. So I'm going to restart my dev server here. And we go to /about, and what am I missing? There we go. And we have about analog there. So that would just take a refresh on the page there. But normally when you have to, or when you're defining page routes, you would define a route, and then it's just registered there for you to use in your application there. So we have our about page here, and this is just a static route that you can define with analog here using this page. So this would just be, like I said, a static page. It doesn't take any dynamic parameters or anything like that. But if we wanted to create a page that takes dynamic parameters, we could create one for that also. If you want to create, and there's a couple of ways you can create pages here. If you're following like parent-child routes in Angular, I'll show an example of that. But you can also create routes that aren't nested in that way. So if I want to create, we'll create a blog. We'll call this blog.slug.ts. And this will create a blog slash slug will be the ID or the like the name of the post that we want to use here. So I'll copy this and we'll name this blog post, and we'll define a component here that's just first blog post. But this is just, like I said, just a general page you can, or general route you can use. Everything is available here. So I can use inject and use the activated route to get the params for this page. So the slug would be provided as that parameter there. So we could say slug would be this.rams, route params, and I'm going to use param map here. Param map. I'm going to use params.get slug there. I still need a map. There we go. So we have our slug there, and we don't have our async pipe. And so I'm going to drop that in here. And we'll save that. And I got an extra item in there, the params. So if all that is correct there, if not, we'll just restart the thing. And we're going to get there. And let's see. And I'm missing my, okay, so that one works. Let's see, did I miss, made my own mistake. Look at slug.page.ts. So it wasn't recognizing it as a route there. So let's try this one again. Log/1, unless I missed something. Let's see, what am I missing?
You forgot the slash the last time you just did it.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you did blog one.
Blog/1. There we go.
There you go.
Full of typos. Feel like I'm on stream. But yes, so as I mentioned here, first blog post, this gives you the dynamic parameter. You could use that to fetch the information for the post. Like I said, defining these routes in this way, you don't have to like configure all that manually. We're using the configuration of the page route itself to give you some information there about that. So those are this was just like a flat route with a dynamic parameter. I could also come in here and create, if we're just talking about parent-child routes, create a parent.page.ts. And we'll come in here and use this one again. We'll call this one a parent. And we'll import the router outlet, because this will be a parent for a set of a child route or a set of child routes if you have more than one. So we'll call this parent route. And we'll call this parent page component. So we have our parent page.ts here. And if I want to create child routes under that, I'll create a parent folder. And then in here, an index.page.ts for that. And since we're just going to copy some components here. We could say app parent home. And call this home page component with really big text. So make that just a little smaller. So we have our parent route and so this would be our parent dot, if we look at this as far as the paths go, we're starting at the root, we would have /parent, and then our index page here would be, our index page would be the root for that. So we could also have other pages under here. So if I wanted another static page or a dynamic page under the parent, we could use that. We'll save this one.
So just confirming, the index under parent and then the parent at the root of pages are the exact same page right now. So they map to the same place.
Well, the parent route is like the layout for if you're thinking about like reusable routes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
parent page is now the layout that all of the sub children pages can use. Got it.
Yes. Yeah. So if we're looking at this from like a route configuration, we have like path, parent here, and we'd have children or load children, because the routes are lazy loaded in that way. But just for the example, we'd have parent and we'd have children, and we have path here, and we have our parent home page component here. So this is kind of the structure that we'd be looking at for that it would produce from this folder structure.
But for including the between lines 6 and 7, we have to insert component parent page TS. Parent component, yes?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I did not put that in there. So we'd have component here, parent page, and then parent home page. Yeah. So that's
layout.
Yeah, what your structure would look like. And if I have another one here, we'll copy this one. And these could have dynamic parameters also. But we can name this child page and have that structure there. So we'd have two routes under the parent. Now we'd have the path, the empty path route, and then the child route here. I don't know what I named that one, but yeah, parent child page component. This is what the structure would look like for the parent page, and then the folder that points to the child routes under that. And of course, if we wanted to link some of these, I could use a standard router link there and import that, and have a router link for child and one for here. Home and child route there. So let's save all of those. And where's my terminal here? And we're going to get one of these right one of these times. Cool. So if we go back to here, first we have our blog/1, and we have our parent route, and then we have our two, well, of course, if you add a router outlet, you have to add in a template also. I'm still getting used to the shortened syntax there. We have our home and then our child route there. I think I should have, there, just so we can see a difference between the two. So our home and our child routes for that. So like I said, you still get the same structure there. Yes, sorry, I'm catching up on chat there. But thank you for that. I missed the router outlet. So that is how you can define those. So like I said, you can make this as nested as you want to define those parent-child routes. You can also define, one thing that you can also define in here is route metadata. So let's say I wanted to add a guard to these pages. And normally, like I said, you could do this in the route config, but we're out, the route config is supported here also. But if I wanted to export some route data, I could define route meta and define that as an object. And this will be coming from AnalogJS router. And in here, these are the same things you can define in a route config. Now we are handling, like I said, the paths and the paths and the building of the path and the like parent-child relationship there. But the other parts we're handling for you, or you can provide the other parts there, such as guards. Okay. So the one, like I said, you can add the things that you're normally adding in here, such as, I'm trying to delete thing in another screen here. Okay. So as I mentioned before, if you wanted to add things such as can activate and you want to use, functional guard in here, you can use can activate. If you want to add a resolver, you can add those in here as part of the route metadata. So all those things are still available for you to define. And this, like I said, creates this in a nice encapsulated way where you can define the config next to the route itself. So the question, anyone knows would our route guard work with this?
We have an open source route guard. I was asking the team if anybody knew if ours would be compatible with this, because that would be a good improvement for us to be making to support analog better.
Yeah, I don't see, well, it'd be something to try. We're not doing anything special with the can activate here. So if it works just like a regular guard, it should work here also.
Fantastic. Then yeah, we'll have to test it out and let you know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely shoot me a link. I may have already seen it. It may have been a while back, but definitely shoot me a link to the project too, because I'd like to take a look. Okay, so talked about static routes, dynamic routes. You can also create routes as, the question is, what if the guard is async? Yes, the async is fine also. If I wanted to change this to just return a function instead of turning something a new promise, that resolves set timeout after 3 seconds or so. Let's see, I want to set timeout. And resolve true. That could work just the same way. You still get the type that you expect here from except from the guard itself. If you're doing the route or the activated route snapshot or the router state snapshot, you still have access to all of those. So pretty standard usage there. So yes, that does work as expected there. And we will try this out here. So if we go to parent, I'm on the home route and I click the child route, and we haven't resolved the promise yet, but after 3 seconds, that still works. So if you wanted to go fetch some data or connect to a service, all that will still work just the same way there too. So we have our promise there. Like I said, pretty standard stuff here. If you wanted to inject a service to do some async work, check to where they're authenticated, you can definitely do all that there. And this can be provided wherever you want to define the route, or define the route meta. So if you wanted to put some in the parent, so you're covering these 2 routes, everything under this authenticated area, you can do that. But like I said, that's pretty standard Angular syntax there. Another thing you can do is, and this is, some of these are more for, if you wanted to create an app, you could create more app, like something more app focused. But if you're looking to maybe add some content pages in here, also their support for using Markdown, we call them, I guess, content routes, but you can use Markdown as routes also. So I may not have the package in here already. So there is a package to add called AnalogJS/content. And this provides some utilities around rendering Markdown pages. And also, if you wanted to use it to build like a blog or something like that, you could use it to read and inject some content into the application. So I'm just running the command to install that. Might need some additional packages here. I guess I should be doing this here. So what I did was npm install AnalogJS/content and a few other packages. I need front matter and marked and prism.js. So we have those packages there. And now go into my main.ts and do that. Okay. So we have our main.ts. I'm going to come in here and add. And this is the setup currently for Analog app, where you have like shared providers between your client and server application. This will maybe change a little bit with version 16, just because they have introduced like a new pattern there as far as an app config. If you've maybe seen it already, but this will probably change to more reflect that. But today, if you want to share between client and server, you can use this main providers file here. And I'm going to use provide content from the AnalogJS package, and I'm going to use the with Markdown renderer. And this just provides like a service and some functionality to render Markdown content there on the page. So we have our main providers here. And this just, like I said, registers the service that you need to render content. So now I can come in here and we'll call this JS drops, or just name it drops.md, and drop some Markdown content in there and say, hello, team. And we'll save that. And I might have to restart. We'll see. And I guess we're reloading this page here. Drops. Let's see. I'm going to restart just in case, because it seems to be making me want to do that. And where's my, I seem to have lost my terminal. 1 second. There we go. Serve. Okay. There we go. So just a, like I said, straightforward example here of using Markdown as routes here. Like I said, you could do this many different, or drop all your, like I said, if you just want to create a page that's strictly content, you drop that, you add the main.ts in there and the Markdown file, and there you go. So yes, hello team. Sorry, sorry, I was catching up on chat there again. Route data utility. There we go. So the AnalogJS content package provides a couple of things there. If you wanted to, like I said, you can create Markdown routes directly here, but if you wanted to create, you know, something like where you want to just store some, we don't want to like necessarily ship these Markdown files here. We can use the content folder to create some routes or create some content that gets rendered also. So I'm going to create a folder here called content, and I'll name this one first blog post, similar to what we had before. And I'll add some front matter here. Title, our first post. And we could define a slug here. First blog post for, and this is, you could use this for listing the content there. And my first post. So we're creating this content, but we also want to kind of inject that into a page there. So I can use this, I'll reuse this blog slug page component that I had here. And there's a component we can use from here, Markdown component that we can drop in here. And we can also inject the, we can actually inject this content into, or we can do this in a couple of ways. We can inject the content into the page as well, the list items for the page. So I will create one here for post page.ts, and we'll use one of our existing components here, and we'll call this one posts, and we'll create a list. There. And we'll let it do some typing for me. So there we have post there. And when it have posts here, we can use, there's a function called inject content files. And we can actually define what the shape of this content looks like. So in my first post here, we have some things that are provided there on the list already. And we're going to add imports in ng4. Add that there. So we have our post, and this will give us some things that we can use out of the box here. So we don't have title defined as part of our content here, but we can define an interface for a post. Say that it has a title of string and it has a slug of string. And then we could pass that type to the inject content files, and we have these attributes, and those will be reflected about the post that we provided here.
Question about the content directory. Is it similar to Astro's content collections concept, where they have kind of protected collections of Markdown types that you can then write for, or is this just something you're able to do with the content library that you built for Analog?
Yes, it's the latter. It's not as extensive as content collections, but kind of the idea here is the same, where you can define. We use this content folder as kind of like a reserve folder where you can drop markdown files in folders, and use them to read those for these read them wherever you need to, like in your application. If you want to list a post and then link to a specific one, then you can use them in that way. Content collections in Astro do have a little bit more, do have more checks involved, where you have like compile time type checking with Zod and things like that. But this is more defining the shape of the files at the template level, but it doesn't necessarily validate that. If you say that I have a title and a slug, that if you miss that from your data, it's not going to tell you that you didn't put that in there. So it could be something to add later, but this is more just a listing for here.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so let me check chat here. Yeah, so we have our post page here, and I'm going to preemptively start because that's what it has sort of wants. So we have our drops page and our posts, and I must have make sure it's got loaded here. Okay. So this is I guess going back to the content post here, or content director here, my first post, we defined the title there and the slug, and then you injected that list of content files into this component, and we're able to list those out. And we could link to each one of those individually and handle them there. Might want to change, yes. Posts, page. The naming of that's a good point. The naming of the class itself is more descriptive for just so you have more awareness of what is there. But we're exporting this as a default, so the default export, so it will handle that either way. This is more for, like, say, readability when you come into this component. But I suppose all these could be page components, and they would still work the same way. Good question, though. So we have the inject content files there. Probably matters when debugging. Yes, that is true. We don't want to have 50 things named the same thing if there's no easy way to distinguish them. So yes, so we have the post here. So this is just giving me the list of posts, so I can use that however I want to. So we'll create a link here. We'll create a router link, and we'll say this is a router link to, we could use /blog/ post.slug from earlier, and link that to the blog slug page here. If I typed all that correctly. So if we link to there, we link to blog/first blog post, and then we're just logging out the slug that we had there. If I wanted to use the actual content itself, I can use the inject content function here. So this would be a post, and we'll define this as inject content. And this follows the same convention as the content file. So what I'm going to do is create a file called post.ts, and move the post into this file and export that. So we can just reuse that from there. And I'll get to your question in 1 second. The question is, why do we need an attribute to access the title and not for the slug in the href? Some of the attributes are defined out of the box for Markdown, I believe, because these are like common ones that we have there. So I believe it provides the slug out of the box, but if we could also use the other one. So this is defined as part of like the content files, what it returns there. But if you had additional things that like custom things that you wanted to define, because there's other properties you can define on the post, you could use those too. I'm trying to remember title. Yeah, this title is a defined one there, but we know that you will have a slug because the slug will match the file name of the post. So that's a thing that should always be there in this particular case. Are the content folder files dynamic or will be included in the build result? Yes, the content files are included, but they will be lazy loaded. So even though I brought in the list, showed the list of posts here, if you go to this particular route, you won't get the entire collection of all the Markdown files. You'll only get the front matter, which will be a lot smaller than, of course, getting the posts themselves. But when you fetch a particular post or a particular piece of content, it will give you that Markdown file, the Markdown file itself with the formatted text. If the slug matches the file name, do we need to define it inside of the MD file? No, you do not. That's a good question also. There was a case where I saw someone that defined the slug differently from the post itself or from the file name, but I would recommend, keeping those two things. That was more for flexibility, but keeping those two things in sync was what I recommend there. So going back to the blog here, I injected the post. I'm going to replace post here with this, and I'm going to use the /content, which will be the rendered Markdown text there. And there's other properties on here also on the post that you can access. But the content will give you the content of the post. And it uses the slug as the parameter name by default. But if you wanted to customize it, you can configure it in this object here. You can name the slug a different string name. If you wanted to name it ID or something, you could change it to that too. Or if you wanted to use if you had like a nested directory of content, you could use that also. And you could use that as the subdirectory. So if you had content/blog and then content/marketing in two different, or that have Markdown files in them, you could use those in those two different ways. Or you have support for reading those content files from each one of those. Okay, so let's go back here. So now let's see if we'll just go in and change this. My first post updated. And we can see that we're actually using the content from the Markdown page there itself to list that. I'll go back to post, my first post, and we're loading that content for that particular Markdown file there. So that is like I said, file-based routing, content routes. We've been server rendering this application the time it's been running. So I'll just bring over the terminal here. You see that was when I just updated first blog post. And you can see this is running in development mode. This is running on the server side first, so everything is getting server rendered there. If you want to, so server rendering is opt out instead of opt in. But if you wanted to disable server rendering, you could go into the Vite config and the analog plugin and set SSR to false, and that will disable server rendering. If you just want to build a client side app and kind of ship that as normal, you still have that option also. So yeah, we talked about the file-based routing. You can also pre-render routes. So if we go to the analog config here, we can add the pre-render option here and define some routes. And this is just can be an array of routes, or you can define an async function that will return you a set of routes to pre-render. So if I can add slash in here or slash post, and one of the other one was blog slash first blog post, I believe it was. We go back to content. Yeah, first blog post. So they would say at build time, we could pre-render both of these pages here to static HTML. So those would be, of course, loaded. The content for those would be loaded first. And today, if you pre-render the page, of course, when Angular starts up, it will destroy and recreate that content. But in, of course, in upcoming Angular version 16, with the client hydration, you won't have to pay that like penalty of it doing that. So it will create the page and create the content and keep the page intact without reloading it. So if we go to, you start up the server here, and I guess another thing I did want to point out is, even though it's using Vite under the hood, it's still using standard ng commands. So ng build, ng test, or ng serve, ng test, all those still work the same, or you still run those the same way, even in that setup there. So I'll run ng build, and this will build the client app for production, and then build the SSR app, and then it will pre-render the pages that we defined for those two routes there. And by default, it also builds a server that you can run your application in, a node server that you can run your application in. So if we wanted to serve it, start up the application statically, after doing a build, you can run node, and this would be in dist analog server / index.mjs. And unless I missed that, typed it correct. Server. Okay, thought I typed that correctly. Maybe not. Oh, server. And then it will build the start up the standalone node server for you to run there. Or you can deploy this to like Netlify or other places that where you can use the serverless functions for the server side rendering and that. So it's already built to handle those environments also. I've seen it deployed on Netlify, and someone recently deployed it on render.com, and other for sale has been deployed there also. So you can actually use it there too. So even though the project is relatively new, some of the infrastructure is actually consuming using other open source projects such as Nitro for like the server side part of it, and it provides some additional deployment options there. So didn't have to do anything extra for that, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so I guess I can show the page here. The server side render pages will be in the post directory, and you can see that the server render content was here in my first post. The links are there, and blog, my first post. That content will be here that we showed on the page there. So if you were to deploy this, you would get the server rendered page first, which of course would be better for SEO, and then you can still boot up the Angular application or use that as you would there. So yeah, so I think that is, make sure if there's anything else I didn't cover. Talk about server rendering, routing, API routes. Oh, that's one thing I didn't mention, API routes. Under the server directory, there is a server routes folder that you can, and this also uses file-based routing, but you can define API routes in here. So you can, if you wanted to use something that's kind of built in, integrated into the Meta framework, I just have an API route here called /hello or /hello v1 /hello, and these are automatically prefixed under the API path. So going back in here, we could use this. You could define here, and then you could do, database connections and things like that here, because these are only run on the server. Did I stop the? Oh, I guess I stopped the server here. ng-serve, and it shows you that when you start up the application that you're running under this particular page under the API path for the API routes. So refresh there, and you can see our message, hello world, is there. And like I said, you could build API routes here, do things like that, and that is supported out of the box also. Or like I said, if you wanted to integrate in with Nest.js, it doesn't prevent you from using that for your API also, if you wanted to use something different. Let's see. Yeah, so that was most of I think that's the features that I wanted to cover as far as like getting set up, building, using the routing, using the route metadata, API routes, or SSR, server-side rendering, or static site generation. Those particular things you can do with it there, and those other features there. So.
Amazing. What questions do people have for Brandon? I have one right away, but I want to give other people a chance. Brandon, what other routing options exist? I know we're doing some file layouting and then filter-based catch-alls, but is there a way to do kind of, I know in SvelteKit and Next, they kind of have the glob patterns for route catching. Is that something you can do with Analog today, or is that something you're working on still?
Yes, good question. You can do catch-all routes also. That was one thing I didn't point out. So if I go in here and create a page not found .page.ts, and we'll copy another one of these and do our standard page not found here, which looks a lot better. We're kind of tweaking that. Page not found. No page. So we created that page there, and start. Now, I will make a note that I guess for some reasons I'm having to restart here, but of course the goal is that you would not have to restart every time you create a new route. You just reload the page and continue to or use those new routes. So if I go back here and I go to a bad route,
You need to go to post bad route or parent.
Oh,
And then
did
the
I
sub route?
create that? Well,
Yeah.
this is at the top level, so yeah, it should be.
Oh, never mind. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so if I create inval, I'll do something that I know shouldn't be there. And do that. Sometimes it's just, I have to reload it just so it catches the new routes in there. And well, I guess that's one thing I can show here also. As I mentioned, the routes are being defined using the files, but if you ever want to like inspect those, you can use this routes export here and see, you can console log that. I can bring that over there. So we can see that the routes are, or what routes are available in here. So we got the block slug parent and the other one here. So it still looks like I'm missing the catch-all route. Let me make sure that I did that correctly. Routes there. Page not found. Yeah, it should be what I'm looking for here, but path match full. And we're just checking. Okay. So let me check the routes here. We got page, we got parent, 1, 2, 3, 4. We should have more routes there. So we'll try this again. Okay, still not trying to manage that. Let me, because I do want to show this one. Node. When all else fails, we'll nuke the Vite cache and see what we get there.
Something I've been noticing as you've been making the selectors match the file name, but you didn't in this particular case. Is that possibly something to do with it?
No, the selectors don't have any impact on the route itself. So I could have no selector here at all. And
okay.
it would, yeah, that should still work there. Yeah, somebody else in the chat asked a question also. Does that need to match there? But no, those two things do not need to match. And yeah, but 404 routes or catch-all routes are supported there. I'm probably missing something here, and I'm probably overlooking something here, but that should be there also for the page not found.
Got it. Another question from the audience is, what is sent along with the rendered HTML? Do we have hydration happening after browser navigation? Is the client router working?
Good question. Yes, it is. So if we go back to posts, am I missing something? Okay, so this initially was rendered on the server, but if we click here, we do have the client navigation or client routing does take over here. So what I can show here is I'll go into here and disable JavaScript. And we will reload this page. So this is a page without JavaScript turned on. So we still should get a link here. But this will actually perform a page reload because the routing still does, the rendered HTML routing still does work in between pages, but we're not using the client router in this particular case. And we can see on the network tab here that I'm not loading any. I'm only loading the page itself. We can go back here to do that also. And we can see the rendered link here. So this works even if JavaScript is turned off, if you're like linking between pages. But the client, if the JavaScript is enabled, then the client router will take over and handle the routing from there. So now we're getting all the chunks and things from the regular Angular routing and doing that from there.
I noticed that you're using Vite. I know historically speaking, the Angular team has been very married to Webpack and hidden that configuration. I know you've been pretty vocal about that on Twitter as well. How did you get to Vite? Can you tell us a little bit of the story of kind of taking Analog to Vite?
Yeah, sure. Yes, like I said, Vite has been eating the web framework, eating the web frameworks by force, I would say. And how I got here was, like I said, I think that Angular should support, Vite as much as possible, just because like the broader web ecosystem is kind of landing on that. So how I ended up starting was I kind of went down the regular, I guess the regular rabbit hole of trying to see if Angular could work in like JIT mode in Vite, which you can use that like today if you use if you import Angular compiler and use all inline templates and styles, you can use Vite today without any like special plugins or anything. But of course, normally we have we use that. Normally when we're developing, we're using AOT mode. So I wanted to see what that would look like as far as being able to use AOT in Angular and still be able to use some of the things on top of Vite also. So what I ended up doing was of course, the other side of this is that the Angular team has been working on using ESBuild as the thing to replace Webpack for building Angular applications. So there's an ESBuild plugin that has been developed inside the Angular CLI repo by the team. And part of what Vite does is it does a couple of things. It handles the like third-party dependencies by like compiling them or optimizing them in advance. So it will optimize like all the Angular dependencies, node modules, and then it transforms the files like the code that you write kind of in using single file compilation. So the thing that was different between and Vite is that Angular doesn't natively support like single file compilation, but the way that kind of Vite works to bridge this, or the way that I have this working in Analog to bridge this gap, is we're still using the Angular compiler to compile everything like on the first pass, and then we're just using incremental compilation on each like change after that. So you're still getting like the Vite experience. You're kind of, like I said, it's bridging the two things. You're still getting like the Vite experience, but then being able to like transform the individual Angular files as you kind of work in your like development workflow. And I'm doing that through the Vite plugin that I created And that has kind of like opened up a lot of other areas also, as far as, like I said, Vite is being like supported in a bunch of areas. So the first thing I think that came out of that was the Astro team was using Snowpack or their custom build solution, and they switched over to Vite. So I was able to use the plugin to kind of bridge the Astro ecosystem and the Angular component, be able to use Angular components inside of an Astro project. So that was one of the things that kind of opened up there, and some other things that come along the way, like being able to use Vitest. And there was recently a quick integration for Angular that uses the Vite plugin under there also. So it's kind of opened up, which is, like I said, kind of in a broader sense, what I wanted to use is to kind of expand the reach of Angular to be able to take advantage of some of these newer tools and ecosystems that are out there.
That's amazing. I have another question from the audience.
Yes.
Somebody would like to know, can you still use a separate template and or style file in your pages? Is there an override, especially after you use a layout at the upper level?
Right. The first question is, yes, you can. There is nothing stopping you from, I guess, okay, I'll put this up front. I use inline templates and styles as a preference, but there's nothing stopping you from creating or using your own external styles and templates there. So both of those are definitely supported in this also. And that's, like I said, kind of the goal of that. You shouldn't have any like hurdles or anything like that as far as using components and building Angular apps as far as like you would normally do. It just has some of these extra developer experience things on top of that. So yeah, inline styles and templates, Sass in your styles is supported. All the normal CSS is supported. Tailwind is supported out of the box. If you generate a new app, it'll prompt you if you want to add Tailwind support, because Vite, naturally supports that. So that is there also. Sorry, I missed the second question. I started a ramble there.
No worries. I think the second part was, can you override layouts that you have implemented? So in the case of, let's say, the parent-child example you did earlier, the parent page TS is our parent layout, but inside of the parent directory, we have our index as our child. Could we change child, so to speak, to not inherit the parent style?
Not inherit the parent style or the parent layout.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. You would have to, if you wanted to, you'd have to use a different, I guess, if you can't necessarily override that today in the Angular router that I'm aware of. So you'd have that same limitation here.
Got it. Yeah, I think some of us have seen Remix and the ability to do layouting at the directory level, and then additionally kind of at the page level override that. So I think there was a little bit of interest to see if that would be possible here as well.
Yeah, this still for the most part, still follows Angular router conventions also. So if you wanted to have some like a dynamic layout, you could do that or I would say if you wanted to have like a dynamic wrapper around the router outlet and have like two different layouts based on that, you could do that, but not necessarily at the point where you configure the routes themselves. But yeah, I was just gonna say, if you're like I say, if you're doing a like typical thing dashboard with two routes under it, you still have that shared layout there, or admin route versus public facing routes. You could definitely define those layouts and things there as separate places. And I will add also that this does support generating a new app within, like if you're using an NX workspace, we just landed support for generating a new analog app inside of an NX workspace too. So that is there also.
I was gonna ask that, so thank you for being ahead of me on that question.
Had to throw that one in there because that was been one that we have been out there for a while and recently landed also. support for being able to generate a new app there. So the other core member on the team, Robin, also landed support for that recently. So definitely some exciting work going on there.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
I think we got time for one more question if anybody's got one. Otherwise, I got one I can send Brandon real quick. Oh, come on. So we've been kind of noticing throughout the presentation that you have the convention of page TS for all of the files and page. And I think for example, and brevity's sake of this demo, you've just dumped files into the pages directory. Is there plans in the future to remove that requirement and or restriction, or maybe further enhance that nomenclature to maybe make it clear, like in the example of the parent page TS that's at the root level being a layout, like parent layout.ts instead of parent page.ts?
Good question. I haven't thought about changing I guess I wanted to keep the number of things that you have to like learn for setting up the layout routes pretty straightforward for now. So as a convention, if you put the layout in there, it would be part of the route, but it could be something we look at in the future if you want to specifically define layout routes. But we made it in mind this way for flexibility at this point, that you could define it in that way. So
awesome. Well, unless somebody cuts me off in the next 5 seconds, thank you, Brandon. We've really enjoyed. Oh, is SSR enabled, disabled globally?
Yes, SSR is opt-in or opt-out. And like I said, if Angular gets to a point where they have more fine-grained, yes, if Angular gets to a point where it is used, you can server-side render in maybe a more fine-grained way as far as individual components themselves, then Analog will support that also, because we're not doing anything that's like far-fetched outside of the Angular ecosystem today. Now, maybe when we get into like server-side data fetching and those type of features, then maybe we'll have something that's like, besides file-based routing, something that's more specific to Analog, but all these things build on top of Angular itself. So that is there.
And then one last question. Do Angular schematics work with Analog? And are there maybe some Analog specific schematics?
Right. So yes, if you were using, an Angular CLI workspace and you wanted to generate an Analog project inside of that workspace, then you can do that also. The same generators that work with NX works as schematics for if you're not using NX. So if you're trying to scaffold an application from scratch, then you can just use like the npm create analog command, but the generators work as schematics also. So it does support both of those. And that's intentional also. It's not that you can only use Analog with NX or only with Angular CLI. The goal is to support both of those, because we can support both of those with the generators and things.
Well, awesome. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today about Analog. For those watching at home, we hope you enjoyed this episode of JS Drops with Brandon Roberts, demonstrating how to use AnalogJS, a new framework for Angular that we're all really excited to start using. We hope to see you at the next JS Drop, and have a good day.
Thanks.